Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Friday training workshop. I think what I'll do is I'll cover another solver to start today's training session off. So let's see, I'll start off with the Dorschden Swing Volatility indicator. So this indicator could be helpful in eliminating or identifying, when you're in a choppy zone, when prices kind of chopping around, because that's kind of what the solver was designed to do, was to measure the swing volatility. So, and so let me kind of get things set up, and I'll start off with that. Okay, so let me prepare my chart here for talking about the Dorschden Swing Volatility. Right. So I'm going to put one of the indicators on the chart here that comes with BloodHound. Right. So there's SI swings and SI swings highs lows. So think of the SI swings as the same thing as NinjaTrader's swing indicator, right? So it's the same thing as NinjaTrader's swing indicator, but it's just a much more improved version of Ninja's swing indicator. But what I'm going to use for illustration is I'm going to use the SI swings indicator on here. So the swings indicator actually just literally shows you, draws the swing lines between swing point to swing point here. So let me put that on there. And how about, I'm going to change to, let's see, I'm on oil. I'll change to a 5 range chart. All right, there, I think that makes a little more sense. Right, so you can see the red and the green lines on here, right, and the labels on here. So that's right from the SI swings indicator. And a lot of people think that it would be simple to just expose this piece of text, as information to BloodHound, and all of a sudden, voila, you know exactly where the highs are, and you know exactly when the lows are. But keep in mind, when indicators do this, either they're back painting to identify this, or in the case of this indicator, it doesn't actually back paint, but what it does is, let's see, let me illustrate here. So, this highest high, right, is right there. We can see historically, right, obviously that's the highest high, but in real time, let me actually, yeah, here I can, if you ever want to test if an indicator back paints, here's how you can do that with almost all indicators in NinjaTrader. It really depends on how the indicator is coded, but most indicators, what you can do is you have to disconnect your data feed to do this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll back like that, and I'm going to hit F5 on the chart to refresh it, right? So we can see we have a double bottom here identified, and I'm going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard and step forward. Now look, that double bottom letter disappeared, and it now turned into a lower low. And see that lower low, every time price moves down, that lower low text just moves. So that's kind of the reason why you can't use the text identification of the swing points here, because they're always moving in real time. And as soon as price started moving up, boom, then the lower low was essentially identified. but price could reverse and go back down, in which case that lower low text would disappear, right? So if price reversed back down, then the indicator would correct itself and it would erase this lower low, and it would start plotting the lower low text as price kept moving down, right? So that's really why you can't use this reliably in its building a strategy, right? So now we can see the text is telling us right, that we've got a lower high. So let's keep scrolling. The lower high keeps moving, keeps moving, keeps moving, and all of a sudden, boom, it turns into a double top, right? So if you were trying to use this text, right, you had this indicator telling you, oh, that lower highs were all made all throughout that, and that would really, throw a monkey wrench into your trading system, right? And price keeps moving up, and then finally, it goes from a double top. So let's say, you wanted to build a trading system that finds these double tops, right? A lot of people think, oh, hey, double top, I can trade that. I'll just look for double tops and, place a reversal trade there, and you're guaranteed a winner. Well, as let me scroll back a couple of bars, and I'm going to hit F5 again, right? So as we watch that lower high, right, it's going to step up, and now we got a double top, so what happens if you tried to trade that double top, and boom, price just kept moving up and made a higher high, and all of a sudden your double tops just don't work anymore in real time. So right, and you can see price just kept on moving up to make a really significant higher high. So all right, so anyways, that little side note about using this indicator here. Now the Dorschden Swing Volatility solver, let me drop one of those on the chart here. All right, so this is the solver that I'll just cover here real quick until I get some questions from you guys. All right, so the Dorschden Swing Volatility. Now what that is doing is, let me get my arrow here, right? It's measuring this distance here, right? So it's measuring, let me draw another line here, right? So it's measuring the swing high, down to the swing low. All right, so it's measuring this distance. So if let's see, let's scroll back here a little bit. So look at all these little tiny swing points here, right? So if we're starting to measure, if we start to measure a bunch of these, let's see, let me stay in draw mode here so I can draw a bunch of lines. So if we start measuring these, right, we can see how close together they get, right? And so if we start measuring these, we can basically, it helps us identify, it's kind of one of the components that we can see visually, that tells us that price is range bound when these swing highs become really small, and we can measure that distance. Right, so so think of the Dorschden Swing Volatility, right? It's actually using this SI swing indicator, right? It has some internal calculations that calculate the distance of the swing points. But if you let's see, let me drop another indicator on here, and so instead of drawing those lines like I did, you could also add the swings highs lows indicator on here, And let's see, yeah, I'm going to need to, let's see, actually no, I think I can, yeah, I can just change that to 2. I think that'll give me the results I want. And let's see, I need to save today's BloodHound file, so let's do that. And it's the 20th already. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So I changed my swing numbers to 2, and so now the widest tops and the widest bottoms are kind of essentially they are, you know, identifying every swing point here, right? So you know, so you can see that now you can visually see what swing points are being measured there. So let me delete some of these lines. All right. Okay, so now let's get into. So now that, you know, I've kind of given an explanation of, you know, what the, you know, swing volatility solver is doing, and also kind of basically what the indicator is doing that's actually feeding the information to this solver. Let's get into the solver, and we'll see how it works. All right, so you can see, I guess let me start from the top down. So the, you know, display name, right? You can change this name to be whatever you want. You know, if you want to make some modifications to it, you know, you could just shorten the name up and just call it your swing volatility. You know, if you do something custom in here or whatever, you can change the name. Description, you know, the initial description is kind of like a mini help description of what the solver is doing, but you can also go in here and erase this and put your own description in there. You know, so that right. So every solver has these two fields, has these two parameters. So if you're using, you know, a comparison solver, right, you could also go in here into the description, and you can write a custom lengthy description for yourself as to what exactly that comparison solver is doing, right? So, you know, using good naming terminology and using good descriptions can really help you understand what a solver is doing when you come back to something like a month later and you look at the solver and you're like, what exactly is this doing? Well, you know, if you use this description field to write yourself a little tiny note, you know, that can help you understand what it's doing, you know, months down the road or whatever, right? And of course, you know, it has the behavior section, right? So this is common to all solvers. You know, I really, for this solver, I guess the evaluate and the invert output probably don't really apply to this solver. So I don't think you'll ever change any of these, right? All right, so calculate swing directions separately. And then we have evaluate mode here. So let's see. And of course the indicator set. Actually, before I get into these, let me come down here to something a little more common here. Right, the indicator settings. You'll notice we have a number of swings and the swing sensitivity. And those are coming from, let's take a look at our indicators here. And it's coming from the SiSwingsHighLows. And, right, so we have the number of swings and the swing sensitivity, right? So this setting here. So if you're using the SiSwingsHighsLows, if you put that on your chart, right, and you match up these two parameters, you know, that'll help you that will help you visually see on the chart, you know, which swing points are actually being measured within the solver here. And swing start a go, right? You'll notice that parameter was not in the indicator, but it's an extra parameter within the solver. And essentially, what this is going to do is it's just going to add a delay into measuring the swing points, right? So let's see here. Okay, so let's looking going back to the chart here. So the swing the swing trend here that's actually in motion is the current swing, right? This is actually the current swing that's actually being measured. Now, if we set this one, you know, even though it's not complete, it's the one being measured. Now, swing start a go, if we set this to 1, then what it's going to do is it's going to look back one swing, right? So it's going to look back to this swing here. And if we set it, you know, obviously if we set it to 2, then what it's going to do is it's going to go back to this smaller swing here, right? It's going to measure this smaller swing. So that would be 2 swings ago, right? So this parameter, you know, starts with 0, 0 being the current swing in motion there. All right. Okay, so let's see. Calculate swing direction separately, and you know what? We have hardly used this. This solver hardly gets used, so let me take a look at the documentation and give myself a little reminder here. Oh, yes, okay. Alright, so, to help explain this, let's actually go back to our logic board, and I should connect that guy up like so. Alright, and let me set some target distances in here, and let's see, I need to get kind of a reference on the chart here. And all right, how about if we look for 15 tick kind of volatility here and see what we get. All right, there we go. So I set the number of swings to 1 just to help illustrate what this is doing, right? And hold on a sec. Actually, let me go into the indicator, and I should have the indicator match up the same. Use the same settings there. There we go. All right, I'll stretch the chart out here a little bit. And okay, so at first glance of this, it's going to look a little confusing, but I guess to help understand this better, yeah, I'll have to explain, how the indicator works again. So you know, as we look at, let's see here. Actually, I'm going to round, instead of 15, I'm going to round this off to 20 ticks. I think that's going to be a little easier to spot on the chart. And let's see, yeah, so the horizontal grid lines are spaced 20 ticks apart. And yeah, there we go. Now this is a little easier to visualize here. Now that 15 ticks is a little more difficult. All right, so you know, if we look at all of this area in here, right? Let me draw this out here. This area in here, right? We can see that that is, you know, that's definitely not. That is not making 20 tick swings. And I'm gonna set my little rectangular box to 20 ticks here. And there we go. So. Alright, so this box is 20 ticks high, and so we can see that, right, these swings in here, you know, didn't quite make 20 ticks, and let's see, yeah, even this swing here didn't quite make 20 ticks, didn't quite, right? So so the solver's telling us that the swings haven't made a 20 tick move. So if you use this solver, you know, connect this solver in to the rest of your logic with an AND node, right? So you would here, I'll just use a bar direction. So let's just say, you know, this bar direction here represents the rest of your trading logic. Right, so when you connect it in with an AND node, whenever, let's take a look at the swing solver again. So whenever there's no output, then what that does is it would prevent your trade signal getting through the AND node and out to the result node. Right, so we can see that this bar direction solver, you know, it's giving us an output when the swing volatility gives us an output here, but it doesn't. But we don't get any signals here when the swing volatility doesn't have an output. So we can see that the swing volatility, right, since the swing points are really small here, they're smaller than 20 ticks, there's no output. And then as we scroll along, and here's our first bar that we actually get, we get another output again from the swing volatility solver. And let me draw an arrow here. So what we do is we can measure from this plot line up to the closing price, like so. And if we measure this distance right from the magenta line down here at 46.62, if we measure that out up to here, we actually have a 20 tick distance. Right, we have a 20 tick distance. So we know that this new swing trend that's actually, you know, building right now, that would be in motion, has at least reached 20 ticks, and so the solver is going to give us an output when doing so. So remember, to illustrate this simplicity, I set the number of swings to 1, so we can get a quick instant feedback. Now, if you set the number of swings to 3, right, that's going to change the indicator here, and oh, there we go. So, like that. That's going to change our indicator here. So if I change that to 3, I would also have to change the indicator to 3. Right, so I'm changing the indicator on the chart just so I can visually see, what is being calculated in the solver. So I have a visual reference on the chart. So we'll set that to 3, like so. And right, so you can see that the swing plots on here alter slightly. Right, they alter just a little bit. So right, you could also adjust the swing sensitivity. So the swing indicator would eliminate these. It wouldn't. So in other words, if we used a bigger swing number like 5 or something, it would probably eliminate identifying these smaller swings. So that may or may not work. In your particular case, you just kind of have to play around with it. Really play around with the indicator and play around with the solver to kind of figure out what settings kind of work best for you, what you like, what's your preference. Really it kind of comes down to preference. So, all right, so that's kind of the core, the core of what this solver is doing. So let me go back here to the calculate swing direction. All right, so let me set that to true. Now, right, so notice that this only gives us a short output. So now what it's done is it's isolated the output so that the output matches the trend direction, right? The most current swing trend direction. So if I set this to false, we get a long and a short output. Right, so that just means that we could, when using an AND node, that means you could take either a long or a short trade. Right, this would allow a long or a short trade, either way. Right, depends on what your trade logic says. Right, so if we take a look at the AND node here, right, so we're getting both down bars and up bars get to pass through the AND node. But if I take the swing volatility and I change the calc swing direction separately, set that to true, now we can see that we're only seeing now, right, the bar direction. So we're only seeing the down bars now, and the up bars, right, the long output is eliminated now. And it's eliminated because our swing volatility solver is only giving us a long output, right? There's no, I'm sorry, it's only giving us a short output, right? There's no long output anymore. So that's what this is doing here. All right, so let's kind of take a little further look down the chart here, right? So we're going to go, so we have a down trend and we only get a short output. And now we're in a long trend, right? And we're in the uptrend, and now we're getting only a long output from that solver. So now, if we take a look at our AND node, right? So now only up bars have an output here, right? So in other words, this could, you can use this as a filter to isolate, your trade signals. So with this set to true, that means that you could only long trade signals would get through if the swing trend is up. And of course back here, only short signals could get through when the trend is down. And all right, so let's set that to false. Now the evaluation mode, this really comes into play when when we're using the number of swings here. So let's see. If I guess I'll set that to 3. And so what the solver is going to do is it's going to take the previous 3 swing points here, and it's going to measure their distance each of the 3 swing trend swings. So let's see. So this would be swing 1, and this would be swing 2, and this would be swing 3. So each of these swing points here are going to get measured and then averaged together, so it'll do an averaging. And as you know that when you do averaging, obviously SMAs and EMA, those are averaging prices, so that builds in a little bit of lag time when you average stuff together. The other settings, so if I use the minimum, what it's going to do is when it's measuring the previous 3 swing points, it's only going to use the minimum. It's going to take the smallest swing point and compare that to your target volatility that you're wanting. It's going to compare that to the 20 ticks that we're looking for. And so if the minimum swing, if the minimum swing distance here that it finds is less than 20, then then you're not going to get an output. The solver won't give you an output. Now, if we use the maximum, then when it's looking back, when it's measuring the previous 3 swings, it's going to find the largest swing point, which in this case it would be, I guess, this middle one here. That looks like the largest. It's going to take that distance of that swing, and it's going to use the largest one, or the maximum one, and compare it to our 20 tick requirement, and use that. So using the maximum is going to give you a faster response time from the swing volatility. Using the minimum obviously would give you a slower response time, because you'd have to make sure that all of the last 3 swings met this minimum swing distance, so using the minimum means all 3 swings have to meet this minimum distance. Using the maximum, another way of saying that is that any of the last 3 swings, just any one of them, if it meets this minimum swing distance, then your condition has been met and you'll get an output here. So so here we go. So you see, if we average them out, we can see it in this area here, there's no output. If I use a minimum, still nothing in this area. If I use a maximum, there we go, we do have some output here, and that would be, we use this, and that's probably would be because of this really long trend. So as the solver is looking back, it finds this really long trend right here, and this long trend meets our requirement, and so we get an output like so. Really that's that's essentially what it's doing. It's not complicated. However, getting the settings, just the way that you like them, that may take some time and patience and experimenting. Just like typical, typical experimentation whenever you find a new indicator, and you're just kind of learning it and figuring it out and find out, what works best for you. So the best thing to do is just take this solver, connect it straight up to the result node, right, and just take a look on the chart. And whenever you see an output, then you know that this would be a valid place, or this is where your trade signals could get through and a trade could actually take place, is when you actually get this output here. And so that's how you can figure out if that's how you can quickly figure out if you have the swing solver set up appropriately for your trading system. So, all right, I think that about does it for this guy. Let me name this logic template here. All right, give me a moment while I take a look at the board. All right, so we're dealing with the 14 and the 20 period. All right, so when essentially at this crossover point, when the EMA 14 is above the 20, you're looking for essentially a pullback, and you want to know when the closing price let's see, pulls back to the EMA 14 by 2 ticks. So let's see, yeah, we could have a number of those. Let's see, we could have, that one might be close, might be 2 ticks. That one might be, and okay, definitely this one here is within 2 ticks. All right. Okay. So, and yeah, so there's kind of two core solvers that are needed. One is to compare the 14 to the 20, right? So we want to know if the 14 is above the 20, for basically for a long signal on a pullback, or right, if the EMA 14 is below the 20 for a short pullback. So I think that's what you're getting at there, Asif. So please correct me if I'm wrong. And all right, so what I'll do is I'll build, the first core requirement is to know, is the EMA 14 above or below the 20? So let's use a comparison solver here. And all right, and simply I'm just going to plug the EMA 14 into the indicator A and plug the EMA 20 into indicator B. And that's all it's going to take. Alright, and so my EMA already defaulted to the 14, so I didn't have to change anything. And let's plug in the EMA 20 now. Alright, so let's change our period to the 20 period. Right, our plot's already selected for us. Okay, so now as we look at this, so we know when the EMA 14 is above the 20, and oh, I'm sorry, actually it's the 30. Let me correct that. Actually should be the 30. There we go. Now things match up, right? So we know the EMA is below when we have a short output, and we know the 14 EMA is above when there's a long output, right? So this kind of acts, right? So this solver acts as a filter. So now when we look for price, pulling back to the EMA 14, this comparison solver acts as a filter, and so we can only get basically a long pullback when we have this long output here. So when this comparison solver is giving us a long output, we can only get a long pullback. Right? And to do that, we're going to need an AND node, like so. But before we go further, now we need to kind of design the logic, right, for this pullback here, So the core requirement of this pullback is that the closing price needs to be within, let's see, 2 ticks of the EMA 14. So what we're going to do is we're going to use another comparison solver. And I'll give this a name first. So we're going to be looking at the close price and comparing that to the EMA 14, by two ticks. Alright, so we're comparing the closing price to the EMA 14. So let's set indicator A to our closing price. So I'm going to change the type over to price, and it's already defaulted to looking at our closing price, so we don't have to do anything there. We're looking for a 2-tick separation, or not separation, I'm sorry, but we're looking for the closing price to be within 2 ticks of our EMA. And so now let's change indicator B over to our EMA 14. Alright, that's already set to 14 period. Now, the key to looking for, so right now, let's take a look at this solver here. Let's plug that in. Alright, so the default output settings here, so if we look, we have for the long output and the short output, right, we have a long here when A is greater than B by 2 ticks. That's the default settings here. So what that's telling us is A, when A, and remember indicator A is our closing price, so when the closing price is greater than B, and B is our EMA 14, so when the closing price is greater than the EMA 14 by 2 ticks, we get an output here. Right, so we can see that. Right, so we can see here we have one bar here where the closing price came within 2 ticks, and we can see there's no output. But this isn't exactly what we're wanting. We're not looking for the closing price to be greater than or less than. We're looking for the closing price to be equal to the EMA within 2 ticks. So let's turn those outputs off, and this is the output that we want to use here. And the same thing down below for the shorts. We're going to turn the A less than B off, and we want to turn the A equals B within, set that to on, and so there we go. So now what we're seeing on the chart is it's telling us when the closing price gets within 2 ticks of that EMA. And this actually didn't quite qualify here. It didn't quite get within 2 ticks. So maybe what we could do is let's try, put a little fudge factor in there. How about 2.5 ticks? And see if that does the trick. And oh no, of course not, because this is an up bar. Sorry, that's an up bar. Yeah, so the closing price never did come down here because, I mean, in real time the closing price came down, but when the bar closed, the bar was up there. So yeah, so that's actually not a good example. So I'll just change that back to 2. Okay, so anyways, let's go back to, so you'll notice that, right, this solver, it gives us a long output and it gives us a short output when A is within B by 2 ticks, right? So we can see the solver is giving us a long and a short output. But this other comparison solver, right, acts as a filter to make sure that we only get a long signal when the EMA 14 is above the EMA 20. So now, if we plug all of these into an AND node, take a look at that AND node. Now we're only getting long signals out there. So alright, so that's kind of the core of it. And you know, if you're looking for a bounce trade, you know, you probably would need some other solvers to kind of clean this up a little bit. But I don't really know exactly what a SIF is using this for, so that essentially is the core, you know, of how you would do something like that. All right, so let's see here. Let's see, we could clean this up a little bit. So let's say, or not clean it up, but we could add a little bit more to this. So let's say we wanted to identify this point here, right? So the closing price, right, is way down there. Let me shrink this up again. All right, so our closing price is way down there, right? So it's definitely not within 2 ticks, but right, the high of the bar actually got within 2 ticks. You know, so if you wanted to, you know, identify this, you know, this bar right here, you know, to get a short signal here, then what we would need to do is, instead of using only the closing price, we would also want to use like the high of the bar. And let's see, the same could be true further down here, like right here where my little triangle is. You know, for a long, you know, for a long up signal, you know, we could use the low of the bar and see if the low of the bar comes within 2 ticks of our EMA 14 there. So if we wanted to, you know, add a little more flexibility to this set of logic, what I can do is, let me change this back to the closing price. Basically, I'll build another one of these, and instead of using the closing price, I'll use the high and the low price. So what I'll do is I'll take a little shortcut here. So that's the solver I just built, right? Comparing the close to the EMA 14 by 2 ticks. So I'm going to make a copy of that. And instead, I'm going to compare the high and the low prices to the EMA 14. And let's see, okay, so in this situation here, right, where the EMA 14 is above the 20, we're going to be using the low price, right? So I can see here on this bar, right, the low of the bar came to within 2 ticks of my EMA 14. And right, and I'm going to want a long signal here, right? Because since the EMA 14 is above the 20, right, I'm going to want a long output if the low of the bar comes within 2 ticks. So for a long output, I'm going to use the low of the bar, and then the opposite is going to be true for the short. So let's set that to the high of the bar. So if I scroll back here, here we go. Here was that other place we were looking at, right? So we saw that the high of the bar came within 2 ticks of our white EMA. So I'm using the high price to generate a short signal. All right, so that's set up. Now I just need to drop it on the logic board here. So we'll go to existing nodes, and there's that new solver I just made. Drop that down here, and let's take a look at it. All right, there we go. So there's a short output there. And we also got a long output there. Right. And we can see we got a lot more signals now. Since we're using the low of the bar, we can see the low of the bars coming in and touching this white EMA a lot more here. So we're going to get a lot more signals. And so yeah, so that would depending on your trading system, obviously that may or may not need some additional filters, but if you're adding this into some other logic, these long signals here may get filtered out with other logic that you may be using. But essentially what we want to do is use an OR node. So if we're going to use the closing price and the high and low price, we want to combine them together with an OR node. So if we take a look at the OR node, right? So now we're getting kind of this bounce, price bouncing here. We got this price bouncing here. So we picked up, right, some additional points here where price bounced off of that EMA. And then we connect that OR node into the AND node to kind of filter it out. So, right, this obviously isn't, a trading system unto itself. It does give you a lot of signals, but the core of that logic there has been met. So, and let's see. All right. So SIF says the pullback should be considered after the 1430 cross. So, yep. And right. So this solver here, where we're comparing the EMA 14. I'm sorry, and that's actually the EMA 30. So this solver here makes sure that that crossover occurred. So if we take a look at that, right, we take a look at the chart. So there we go. We can see right here's our EMAs crossing over each other, and so that's identifying that the EMA is above the 30. I'm sorry, I kept saying 20, but this is an EMA 30. So, right. So, taking this and plugging it into an AND node, if I take a look, let me take a look at the chart now, right, we'll see that there's not going to be any short outputs as long as the 14 is above the 30, right? There's not going to be any short output. They're all going to be long outputs only. So, all right. I hope that kind of gets you in the ballpark of what you're looking for. That's about as far as I can go with the amount of information you gave me there, Sif. So, let's see. It looks like Armando might have a question for me. So I guess, Armando, I'm not understanding the last part of your question here. So let's see. Are you trying to find something that identifies when price is continues on. Is that what you're trying to identify? So I guess to explain this to everybody else, Armando is using Ninja Trader's swing indicator, and so he's got a system that gives him a signal when I'm assuming that when price comes close to the swing indicator's plots and bounces off, he's getting a signal. Obviously sometimes price just continues on through those swing lines from the swing indicator, and so I can tell Dorschden that your question is about what to do when price breaks through the swing line, but I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. So let me put the swing indicator on here. Okay, there we go. So I think Armando, I can, from what I'm getting from your question, I know you're asking about this situation here. So, right, you can see the bright green dots, which is the swing indicator, Ninja Trader swing indicator, and you're asking, when price breaks through and continues on up, that's the scenario you're asking about, or you're identifying, but I'm not sure exactly what the question is about when this happens. So I guess I can tell you that the swing volatility solver won't help with this type of condition, right? It's not looking, it's not. All right, all the swing volatility solver is doing is it's just measuring the distances from from this swing to this swing. That's all it's doing, is it's just measuring the length of these these swings here. So right, so you can see these lines here, right? Those lines. It's the swing volatility solver is just measuring the height of each of these lines. That's all it's doing. So it doesn't take into account price, breaking through a swing point or anything like that. Oh. Okay. All right. So Terry has a question. He's using the DM indicator from Ninja Trader, and we're going to be looking for higher lows on both the DI plus and the DI minus. So, all right, let me get that set up here on the chart so we can get some visual references here. Alright, and Terry wants to use the 7 period on that. Alright, so here's the identification of a new starting uptrend, and let me read your statements here again about the higher lows. So okay, see, a higher swing low. Well, so a higher swing low, that's really all going to come down to you know, how the indicators behave when they identify these higher swing lows. All right, so let's see. So we have a swing low there, and you know, I'm not sure if this one would be identified. Probably not, because you know, price didn't move up very much, so this would probably not be identified. I'd imagine this is the one that would be identified as a swing low right there. Right. So to identify, you know, swing highs and lows, what we're going to need to do is nest the SiSwingsHighsLows indicator onto the DM. So let's do that. All right, and you know, this will get really complex because I'm just going to do it for the long side here. So let me explain a little bit. Right, so if we're going to draw the swing highs and lows of the DMI plus, right, that's going to take one instance of the SiSwingsHighsLows. For just the DI plus plot, the blue one, and we need a separate, we need an additional SiSwingsHighsLows to be able to visually see the swing points on the DI minus, or the red plot here. So, well, actually, maybe I might have to put this. Well, we'll see. I'll just add one for now, and we'll see if I need to add another one here to help explain this. All right, so let's see. Next thing, I need to change my input series. All right, so I'm doing this just so I can see the indicator on the chart visually. Let's change our period to 7, and we're gonna feed the DI plus into the swings highs lows indicator, like so. And all right, let's take a look here. And I need to change the panel. Let's see, that's going to be panel 2. Alright, so now here comes the tricky part, is finessing the indicator inputs to kind of get what I want. So I can see, right, hopefully you can see this magenta line, right? So it's identified this swing low here on the DI minus way down here. It didn't identify this one where I drew this white line. It didn't. Actually, I'm sorry, it did. Yeah, there we go. It did identify it right here, but it didn't identify this one, this upper one here. It identified it way back here. So let's see. So Terry, it looks like let's see. Yeah, it looks like indicators may not be able to identify these swing highs and lows on the DI plus, you know, or the DI minus looks like they may not do a sufficient job, but let's see. Maybe if we change our sensitivity down, see what that looks like. Well, we definitely have this swing low here identified, and we do have this really minor one identified. So maybe that'll work. Maybe not. Let's change that to 2 and see what it looks like. Well, as soon as I change this to 2, you know, even though we can visually see that there's a higher low, right, marked by my white line, the indicator took quite a long time to identify that swing low there. Yeah, if I put this back to 1, yeah, then we're really getting this minor, kind of this minor swing in the indicator in the DI plus. It's identified one bar afterwards. So, I'm just going to play around with some settings here and see if I can find something that works a little better. Alright, well, so number of swings 4 and swing sensitivity of 1 works in this particular case. So at least I can kind of build the logic out for this one particular case. So it may not work, in all cases down the road, but at least I can build you an example. Right? So you may need, a special indicator to identify the DI plus and DI minus, higher lows and that you're looking for. But in the meantime, I can just use this as an ideal scenario to kind of build that logic out there. Alright, so that's it. I just got to remember my settings here. 4 and 1. Alright, I'll close that and let me delete my white lines there. Okay, so there's the area of interest. Alright, so I'm going to make a new logic board here and right, so I take it, when you're using the DM indicator, typically you only want long trades when the DI plus, right, is above the DI minus. So let's kind of build that first solver to create that filter. Right, so we're only interested in long signals when the DI plus is above the DI minus. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare the DI plus to the DI minus. Alright, so let me give this a name. And now I'll just set up indicator A and indicator B. So I'm going to set indicator A to the DI plus first. All right, change our period to 14, and we're going to select our DI plus plot line. All right, so we're going to put the DI plus up here in indicator A, and we'll put the DI minus in indicator B. And so now we need to select the DI minus. Like so. Great. And if we look at the chart, there we go. So we're getting a long output when the DI plus is above the DI minus. And if the DI minus is above, then we're getting a short output. So that kind of creates a signal filter. I'll set that aside. And alright, so the next part of this logic is to identify, let me grab an arrow here. So we want to identify right when this magenta plot is essentially when it steps up. Right? When it steps up like that, we know that a low point has made a higher low. All right, so this tells us a low point has made a higher low. And let's see here. Yeah, I guess just to note again, just so you know that this the swings highs lows indicator may not be the appropriate indicator to find these highs and lows on your DI plus and DI minus, because one thing I can see is that, yeah, for some reason, well, yeah, this low point here did get missed. So this low point here did get picked up eventually. It took a little while. And actually, the reason why there's this long delay and the reason why this one didn't get picked up is because the number of swings that I chose did cause that. But I set the number of swings up higher just so, once again, just so we can work in this area right here, just to build the logic out. So, okay, so back to identifying these higher lows. We're looking for the magenta line to step up like this, and that tells us that a higher low has been made, so the magenta lines are identifying the lows, the low points. So alright, so to build that, once again we're going to use a comparison solver. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the value of the magenta plot on this bar and then look at the value of that plot line on the previous bar, one bar back. So we're going to use this displacement here to find the magenta value one bar back, because it's one bar behind. So indicator A is going to be looking at the current bar, with my red arrow, and indicator B is going to be looking one bar back. So let's set up indicator A. So this is going to require a bunch of nesting here, because we have the swings highs lows. Actually, I'm sorry, we have the DI plus fed into the swings highs lows. So let's get that done here inside of BloodHound. Alright, so we're analyzing the swings highs lows plot, right? And we're actually looking at the widest bottom here. Right, so the widest bottom is the magenta line, and the blue line, the horizontal blue line, that's going to be the widest tops. And let's see. Yeah, let's see. We can only so this solver is only going to look at the DI plus. So I'm just going to select the widest bottoms for both. And let me put a name in here. Alright, and oh, hold on, I'm going a little too fast here. Okay, so we have the SiSwingsHighsLows, and what I hadn't done yet is I need to nest the DM indicator into it, just like we did on the chart, right? So let's grab the DM indicator, change the period to 7, and we want to feed the DI plus into the swings highs lows indicator, right? Just like that. So that's the same thing as what we did on the chart here. Okay, so I'm going to plug this solver in to the result node and take a look at this. And alright, so we need to now alright, so we have indicator A set up. Now we need to go do the same thing for indicator B, so that indicator B can be looking at the previous bar, the one bar back. So let's set this up again. Alright, oh, and hopefully you guys noticed I didn't change my indicator settings here. Let's change that for this one. Alright, so we're still using the widest bottoms, right? We're only using the magenta line to identify when the lows, do that stepping up. And so now I need to nest the DM indicator in there. Oh, there's that. And let's change that to a 7 period. And we want to feed the DI plus into it. There, like so. And let me go back, and I need to correct the indicator A settings. Alright, so let's see, my swings, highs, lows. Yeah, that was set to 4, and that was set to 1. And my DM, that's set to 7, DI plus, that looks good. Okay, so now I need to set my displacement for indicator B, set it to 1. So now indicator B is set to look one bar back. And so now when we look at our chart, right, we can see all these points here when the magenta line steps up, right? It stepped up, magenta line stepped up, stepped up. It's even identifying, right, when the magenta line steps down as well. And we're getting a short signal out of that. So we're not really interested when this when the magenta line, right, steps down. In other words, when we get these lower lows, we're not interested in those. So I'm just excuse me, I'm going to set my evaluate to long only, and there we go. So now I get rid of whenever the low points, whenever the swing lows step down, right, I got rid of those short signals there. So and let's see here. Okay, here we go. So right here, right, we have a long signal here. However, the DI minus is above the DI plus, right? So we would want to, filter that long signal out, and that's what this other solver is going to do, right? This other solver here, let me mark the bar here, right? So this is the bar that's giving us the long signal, and if we look at the other solver that's acting as a filter, right, we can see it's giving us a short output. So the two are going to cancel each other out when we use an AND node. Actually, let's see here. So let's take a look at our signal first, right? So there's our long signal, and as soon as I connect in this other solver that's doing the filtering, boom, that long signal went away. So, yeah, all right, so there is our long signals when these low points on the DI plus, step up. So I can see I've got, let's see, from here to here, and from here to there. Yeah, let's see. Let me delete that. So let me go into a little detail on how this is working, so that way you have a full understanding of what's going on here. So this signal here, this long signal, right? If I trace this magenta line, if I trace it back, right, basically this long signal identified this higher low, right? It identified this low point stepping up to this low point, right? So if I look horizontally, I can see this magenta line here. Let me draw another white arrow, right? There you go. Let me get rid of some of this stuff here. Right, so that low point, basically, it took, several bars. It looks like it took about 3 bars for this low point here to get identified. And that's where this long signal is coming from. So there is a bit of a delay, and that's due to the, the swing high-low indicator. Obviously it wasn't written to function, appropriately for the DM indicator. It was really written to work on price movement. So Terry, you may need to have a special indicator written, to work the way you want it to work on the DM indicator, right? So the particular way that you want your low points to be identified on the DM indicator, you may need some special coding done. To, I don't know, you might be able to take NinjaTrader's swing indicator and modify it, or you might be able to take, see, I don't know, maybe there's something up on Big Mike's that can be taken and modified or something like that. But, so really, I think getting this to work the way you want, once again, is going to require an indicator that identifies these low points on the DI plus and on the DI minus, the way that you like to see them identified. So, but this, this logic here is going to be the same. This logic's going to stay the same. The only thing you'd have to do is just, is just swap out the, swings, highs, lows with whatever indicator you want to use to identify those high and low swings. Let's see. I don't see any other questions coming in here, so I'll just build the logic for the for the other side, for the opposite side. Alright, I'm going to rename this and node here. So this is the DI plus higher lows. So that's the signal we're getting out of that. And to get the DI minus higher lows, I'm going to have to create another solver. Alright, so because remember, this solver here is only looking at the DI plus. So let's see. Yeah, I'll just create a new one here. Alright, so this is going to be the DI minus higher lows. And let's plug this in here. Oops. There we go. And let's see, so since we're looking at the DI minus, right, I know that we're going to need to change our evaluate to look at the shorts only, right, because this other solver here, remember I changed the evaluate to look at longs only. So I'll set this one up to look at the shorts only, and now I just need to get my indicator set up here. So let's go back to our swings highs low indicator, and I'll use the same settings here. And let's see, yeah, I think we're still going to be using the widest bottoms since we're looking for the DI minus to make higher lows. We're going to be using the widest bottoms again. And oh, hold on. Let me nest the DM indicator into that. There we go. Nest that in there. 7 period. And we want to nest the DI minus into that. So there we go. Okay. And I need to do the same thing, repeat the same thing for indicator B. And we're using the widest bottoms again. And now, when you're nesting, I find, just a little side note here, when you're going to nest an indicator in here, I find it the way you get the nesting button to pop up is you select. Sometimes this button will gray out on you, and if the nested input button is grayed out, just select your indicator here that you want to nest into, and then we'll go find our DM indicator and then nest that in there like so. You notice how the nested input button is grayed out, and let's see here. Yeah, so selecting on that and then going back to the main indicator list will populate that nested input back up again. All right. Change the period to 7. We're using the DI minus this time. And we need to set our displacement to 1 again, like so. And let's take a look. Oh, all right, and that's right. So let's see. Yeah, so we need to reverse the output here, right? So if we take a look at this, we can see, let's see, it's identifying, yeah, since we set the evaluate to short only, it's telling us when these low points are stepping down, right? So we can see, right, actually, how about if I use an arrow we can see this low point to this low point. We got an output. This low point down to this low point. We got an output. So I need to actually change my short output, change the evaluation, because really, remember, we're looking for, let's see, we're looking for, let's find a good spot on here. Here we go. Right, we're looking for higher lows. So we're looking really for A to be greater than B in this case, but our short outputs are identifying when A is less than B. So we're going to turn that off and set that to 0. Set that one to 0. And we're interested when A is greater than B. Set that to 1. There we go. And since we're not using a long output, I don't know, I could leave that as it is. It doesn't matter. Or I could just turn them off. Either way, you know, if I turn these off, then, you know, I could leave this evaluate to both, because the long output, there is no long output turned on, so we're not going to get one. You know, so there's kind of two ways to do this here. And yeah, so there we go. Without seeing the swings, highs, lows on the chart, you know, it's kind of hard to figure out. Why we're getting a short output there. Can't really visualize that. It could be just a delay in the indicator that's doing that. Let's see. Yeah, there's still no questions coming in, so I might as well. Yeah, I might as well. I'll modify. I'll add a second swings highs low indicator onto the chart here. So actually, I'll modify this one a little bit. We're not interested in the tops. I'll turn the tops off, and let's see. Since this swings highs lows is set to the DI plus, how about I'll modify my magenta line and I'll change it to blue. All right, and I'll add another swing high lows on here, and this one will nest the DI minus into it. Let's see, let's change that and change that to match the settings in BloodHound. So this will help us visualize, you know, what BloodHound is actually looking at. Alright, so let's get the DM indicator nested in here. And we want the DI minus this time. And see, once again, we're not interested in the tops, the widest tops, so I'll turn this off. And we are interested in the widest bottoms since we're looking for higher lows. Make that a little smaller. Let's see what that looks like. And oh, I need to change my panel here. Change it to 2. All right, there we go. Bunch of craziness going on there. This chart's getting really busy. All right, I'm gonna turn the ADX, turn that way down. All right, so now this helps us see where these long signals are coming from. So when that stepped up there, we got this change in the indicator right there, right? And then when this low point made it from there to there, that's what was identified by the indicator, and then we got our change in the indicator plot. All right, so that's how it functions. And all right, so now, so I've got that one solver set up. So I got the solver set up. All right, let's get this back here. Right, so this solver we're working on here, that is just purely identifying when the swing high-low indicator is stepping up, right? When it's stepping up for our DI minus plot. And so now the next thing to do, right, is we need to use our directional solver. Remember, this solver here is providing kind of our directional filter. That way we don't get short signals when the DI plus is above the DI minus, right? So we'll need to grab another AND node, plug our filter in, and plug, basically this guy is what's providing the trade signals, right? Whenever there's a higher low, this is providing those signals. And so there we go. So let's take a look at the raw signals again, and I'll try and find some that I got filtered out here. Ah, here we go. Yeah. So we can see the DI plus is above the DI minus. We got a short signal there, a short signal. But if we take a look at the AND node, where we have the filtering added in, right, that signal's gone, and the signal over here is gone. So, and right there, the DI plus crossed above just in the nick of time to get this short signal here. All right, so we have a DI minus higher low coming out of this AND node. And now to get both of these signals, to join them both together, we're going to use an OR node, and this will join both of these together like so. There we go. All right, so there's a long signal and a short signal. They're all together now. All right, Terry, so there's really the logic, right? The logic is the simple part. Really, it's coming up with an indicator that works with the DI plus and the DI minus the way you want it to. That's probably going to be the bigger challenge there. So, all right. Let's see. That little ding was 12 o'clock, and I don't see any more questions coming in. This was a pretty slow Friday training workshop, and I hope it's because everybody's outside and enjoying the nice spring weather that's coming. So let's see, I'll give you guys a couple more, another minute here, see if there's any other questions that we'd like to cover. If not, I guess we'll call it a day, call it a weekend. All right, so Leonardo has one. So take your time, Leonardo. Take your time to write your question out thoroughly. So, all right, so you got a private indicator. All right, so, just so you guys know, obviously I can't demonstrate, custom third-party indicators on here because it requires a license, but also it's unfair to other people, because if I put a custom indicator into these logic templates, then anybody that doesn't have that custom third-party indicator wouldn't be able to open up the BloodHound file. So, if they tried to, they'd get a bunch of error messages because that custom indicator would be missing. So, Leonardo, if you can somehow, replace your custom indicator with a comparable, stock indicator from NinjaTrader, something similar, then, then we can go from there. So, so as, so just as you can see, I was able to build Terry's logic here, using an indicator that's available to everybody. So at least I could build the logic, and then the next step for Terry would be to find an indicator that would replace the swings, highs, lows, to identify the these low points stepping up. So okay, so Leonardo's asking if BloodHound can detect a change in color, and no, not. I'll speak in general terms. In general terms of what NinjaTrader, of what NinjaScript allows. So if there's a lot of moving averages out there that change color. So NinjaScript doesn't allow you to identify the color of an indicator. All right, so that means BloodHound doesn't have a way. There's no way in code for BloodHound to identify what color an indicator is, or when an indicator changes colors. Hopefully NinjaTrader version 8 will give that capability. That would be great. What has to happen is the indicator has to provide another source of data, and typically that would be like a data series or a bool series. So I can illustrate an example of an indicator that does that. So let me go to my indicators here, and let's see. There we go. Okay, so this TC trending TSF, this is a free indicator off of a website. If you Google it, if you Google TC trending TSF, you'll find the company that produced this indicator. So it's the company that made this indicator is a NinjaTrader indicator consultant. All right, so they write indicators for NinjaTrader, and they posted this one up on their website for free. It's in their free section. And let's see, I'll just use the default settings here, and I'll make this extra thick so we can see it. And oh yeah, look, you can even see it's coloring the bars as well. See, right, it even colored the bars. I think there's a, let's see, there we go, display. I'm just going to have it change the indicator. I'm going to change this so it just changes the indicator color. Right, so we can see the indicator changes from red to blue. Now, if we take a look at this indicator inside of BloodHound, you'll see something unique about it. So this is what good programmers will do. Good programming companies will provide this extra information I'm going to show you here. So this is the TC trending TSF, and that's it. Yeah, the TC part, that's the acronym for the company's name. So I don't remember the company's name, but the acronym is TC. So all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the threshold solver here. Now the threshold solver doesn't make sense when you're looking at a moving average, but since we're trying to identify the color of this moving average, that's why we're using the threshold solver. So let's change this indicator over. Alright, so there's our TC trending, and so here's our normal plot, right? So there's the plot. So we could use the plot to identify, if the indicator is sloping up or sloping down. And you'll notice they added this bool series here. So a bool is a true or false statement, right? So it's Boolean. Bool is short for Boolean. And it tells us, and they named it good, so it says signal direction. So if I use this bool series in combination with the threshold solver, so remember, a Boolean is a true or false statement. So a true or false in computer language is 1 or 0. So 1 means true, 0 means false. So if we're going to get a true statement, I'm assuming that true means the trend is up, right? So I'm just going to make an assumption here. And so when you have your own custom indicators, third-party indicators doing this, you're just going to have to play around again, because you never know what how the programmer set that bool series up. Or also, instead of this being a bool series, this could be a data series, right? You might see some indicators that give you a data series here. And if it's a data series, then typically what the programmer does is they put a positive 1, when the indicator is, in an up direction, and typically they'll use a negative 1 when the indicator is in a down direction. And 0, if that data series has a 0, then it usually means your indicator is flat or something like that. Okay, right, so there, we can see when the indicator turns blue, we were able to identify that with the threshold solver and that bool series. It tells us when the indicator is blue, and then it turned red, right? It turned red. And if we want to identify the red, then essentially when that Boolean is false, it's going to be 0. And so at 0, I'll just set the short output for at 0, like so. So, the programmer who wrote this, added that extra bool series so that, we could identify when the color is blue or red. Or in other words, when the indicator is up or down. All right, let me actually, I'll rename this to a bool series example. That's really what this is. It's an example of using a bool series. So, Leonardo, hopefully your indicator has something like that, right? It's going to need, it's going to need a bool series or a data series, that gives you the signal direction or color direction or trend direction, whatever name they decided to use here. So if it's a data series and they're using -1 for a downtrend, then what you'd want to do is you want to put -1 down there, right, and then set your short output when it's less than -1, like so, right? And so that's how you would set up a data series, right? use the E. So, and everything, the B, C, and D need to be left at 0, right? Because these need to be in descending order, right? Since -1 is the lowest number, that needs to be set to E, right? So okay, let me read on. There's another part of Leonardo's question here. Let's see. All right. So actually, Leonardo doesn't have a second question. He was just explaining his first one there. So yeah. So Leonardo essentially, yeah, use the threshold solver and just kind of play around with some numbers. You know, I've seen some indicators written where it'll have a data series, right? So this will be a data series, and sometimes the programmer will use like a value of 3 to represent something, and they'll use a value of 2 to represent like another kind of condition that the indicator identifies, and it'll use 1 to identify, you know, another condition. You know, so if that's the case, you know, if you find that your indicator is, you know, using, you know, different or outputting different numbered values, then what you'll need to do is you'll need to create a different threshold solver for each of these numbers that you want to identify, right? Because remember, a solver is only going to give you a long output or a short output. You know, so you know the output of solvers don't identify, you know, whether the value is 3, 2, or 1. Right? Solvers are just there to look, you know, to say, you know, hey, if I got a 3, you know, tell me when a 3 shows up. And so this solver, so you'd have one solver that tells you, oh, you know, the indicator gave me a value of 3. You'd have another threshold solver that said, oh, the indicator gave me a value of 1 for each one that you're trying to identify. So, all right, let me see some other comments here. So Pep is asking, is it possible to use divergence with the MACD and Fibonacci levels for entries in BloodHound? Absolutely. Yep. You just need to have, all right, an indicator that will provide that information for you, you know, into BloodHound. So you can do that. Remember, the indicators do that complex work. BloodHound basically takes all the bits and pieces, you know, from what the indicators are calculating, and BloodHound basically puts them all together, you know. And so when you get a combination of indicators doing, you know, finding certain conditions in price movement, and BloodHound takes all those different indicator conditions and basically joins them together to give you that final trade signal, right? So Pep, what you can do is there's several videos on divergence. So let's see, let me back up here. There we go. So I just hit the back button until I got to my BloodHound workshop, and then let's see, we'll plug that in there. And all right, so here's a couple of videos here on divergence. All right, there's a stochastics one. Let's see, there's an RSI divergence. I guess someone wanted to use an RSI divergence for an exit signal. Right, is an exit signal in Raven. Let's see, I think this one, yeah, here's probably a good one here. So Daniel Rowe did a couple of videos, or hosted a couple of these workshops, building a divergence system. So yeah, this one here, Daniel took his divergence, his BloodHound divergence system that he built in, and he's showing you how you can use essentially any indicator in that divergence system. You know, so you can watch this one, and I can see here it's yeah, Daniel Rowe did this one. Let's see. Yeah, here's another one where we took the MACD divergence and we converted it to use the TSI. So yeah, you know, divergence, I guess the logic, you know, I guess the computer logic behind a divergence is slightly different depending on what indicator you want to apply a divergence to. Right, so because you know, let's say, all right, we have this DM indicator here, and if we're trying to find a divergence on it, you know, the BloodHound logic and the indicator logic is going to change slightly, because this indicator, the DM indicator, right, it has positive numbers, and actually they're all positive numbers. Yep, they're all positive values here. That's right. But let's say if you want to find the divergence of a MACD, you guys know that the MACD goes above the zero line and below the zero line into negative numbers, and so therefore, you know, the indicator that looks for divergence is going to have to be coded slightly different, because now you're dealing with negative numbers, and so the divergence, building divergence logic in BloodHound would be slightly different when you're looking at a MACD divergence versus a stochastic divergence as well. So just kind of a mental note there for you guys to keep in mind. You know, but I think the best video to start off with is this one here, the modify BloodHound divergence to use any indicator, right? So let's see, I think, yeah, you can, let's see, yeah, we have this BloodHound template, and Daniel also has this BloodHound template, right? So if you want to get the latest and greatest BloodHound template that Daniel had built, I would suggest contacting Daniel on his website. So actually, if I click on this, bring that up, you'll see his website is mentioned right there. It's tradetheplan.com, and actually I happen to have it open right here on a tab here, right? So it's tradetheplan.com, and you can see he has a contact tab, and so you can write him a short little message asking him for his his latest and greatest divergence BloodHound template, and he'll give that to you. And he actually might have, let's see, he might, I think he also has a little write-up somewhere on his website. You have to take a look around, but I think somewhere on his website he also has an explanation, a little write-up on how that divergence system works. And I think he has his own video as well, with, you know, explaining how the divergence system works. And let's see, okay, fib levels. So Pip is asking about the fib levels. Sorry about that. Yeah, I didn't get to that part. Let's close that back out. And yes, Daniel also just recently did did one of these Friday trainings on fib levels, because he just happened to get a fib indicator put together. There we go. Top one on the list. It says, okay, so it was uploaded about a month ago. There you go, fib retracement system with Daniel Rowe. So once again, Daniel had an indicator, custom indicator written that provides the fib levels that BloodHound can read, right? Most of the fib indicators I've seen out there for free, the reason why they don't work with BloodHound is because those indicators actually use this. They actually draw these, either they draw the Fibonacci retracements or the extensions. So most of the indicators, I've seen use this Fibonacci retracement, and they draw that tool on there. And unfortunately, NinjaTrader didn't provide a way for us, to read the value of this little, drawing tool. So therefore, BloodHound can't read that. But Daniel had an indicator written, so it actually uses a plot. So it will actually plot those retracement fib levels on the chart there, which then, BloodHound and other indicators can read those plot lines. So, yeah, there you go. So you can watch this video, or once again, you can go to Daniel's website, and I'm pretty sure Daniel has the same video uploaded. And also, you'll need to get that Fibonacci indicator from Daniel as well. So it's probably here in the free download section. So if you don't find the indicator on the site, once again, just use the contact us page and just, ask Daniel to email it to you. So he did make it free for everybody. And all right, I think that kind of wraps it up, guys. So we'll call it a day. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and enjoy the good weather that this weekend should bring, except for Boston. I heard those folks on the East Coast might get a little bit more snow, so summer's just around the corner, guys. All right, so have a good weekend, and I hope to see you all next Friday. All right, bye-bye, guys.